What is going on, everybody? It's Tuesday morning. That means it is time for that effing morning after show. How did you guys do on your fantasy weekend? I could have done a little bit better, but we'll get into all the numbers, all the stats, all the things that you guys want to hear and know about, and we're gonna do it all right now. Good morning, everybody. We will be joined by the Adam Hulse in just a little bit to recap your fantasy weekend. I'm excited. It was a good slate of games, and I don't know. Fantasy numbers were not what we were hoping, but we will get into that as well. Adam, it is good to have you back on a Tuesday morning. I hope you did a little bit better than I did. I know you did in the our season predictions that we'll get into. Um, but it was kind of a, I don't know, kind of a letdown weekend unless you had CJ Stroud.
Yeah, it was pretty much the Texans week, right? Like if you
Yeah,
had a Texans receiver, tight end, quarterback, you did great this week. And besides that, not a whole lot out there. Besides my guy, CeeDee Lamb, he's still going strong too.
you know what's crazy, and we're gonna get into that too. But I got to touch on it for a second. CeeDee Lamb, 191 yards, 0 touchdowns. Like, how do you do that? How
Yeah.
do you go 191 yards and then not make the end zone? Although he tried, he almost had one at the end. They needed him in the end. It didn't happen. At least he
Yeah, he's
caught the ball.
basically been their entire offense the last couple of weeks
He
with
really
how many
has.
targets he's getting. So that's basically been the Cowboys' adjustment. It's just throw it to CeeDee.
Absolutely. Let's do the record watch first, and then we'll do the rewind. Uh, because they kind of go hand in hand. So we'll start the morning off with the record watch. As you guys know, we went through and we did every team. We looked at every team schedule. We went game by game, and we predicted how everything was going to go down before the season ever even started. That's how deep we got into this. And honestly, we're doing pretty darn good. We didn't know that Cousins was going to go out for the year. We didn't know that Aaron Rodgers was going to go out for the year. We didn't know that uh, JJ was going to go down. Jefferson was going down for a bit
We
this
didn't know
year.
that
And
Dobbs was going to be an upgrade from Cousins.
my gosh, we're definitely going to get into that. We talked about that last week. I said, let's get into it. So the record watch right now, I went 9-5 this weekend. It's okay. It's all right. But our friend Adam here, double digits again at 11-3. You are dominating, my friend. I said at 86 and 50. You are at 91 and 45. Haven't even gotten that 50 loss column yet. I feel like I'm kind of hurt being in that 50 loss column, but 86 and 50 isn't bad. 91 and 45 is better. Adam extends his lead overall by 5. Visiting teams, I've won 61 games this year. Home teams are now at 75 wins. So the home field advantage keeps extending 10-4 this week. And we will, again, I think we're doing pretty good having predicted all this before the season ever started.
No, I mean, we say it every week. I mean, our records to me are way better than I expected us to do, considering all of the unknown variables that we weren't able to take into consideration along the way. If we were picking week by week, we might not even have as good of records that we have right now. So that's pretty impressive.
It's pretty crazy. At or above double digits every week, and we did all this before the season ever started. Yeah, kind of interesting. We're gonna have to keep doing this and like see how it keeps going along every year because it's been pretty interesting that we can do this. Vegas is probably paying attention. Let's get into the rewind and look at last week. Fantasy Rewind brought to you this week by Wake Up TSS Fantasy. It's live every Sunday morning on the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel, as are we, as are all these great entertaining shows. You can find us at the Fantasy SC on the X. And they just cover everything in the morning. It's your first morning show that you want to catch every Sunday morning. A lot of good advice there. And I even got a little bit in there about who not to play, the dingus plays of the week. TSS, wake up TSS Fantasy every Sunday morning. The rewind, let's talk about it. Tennessee and Pittsburgh started us off on Thursday night. We knew this wasn't going to be like an amazing game. This wasn't going to be like the most exciting game in the world, but Pittsburgh pulls it out. Levis, looked okay. He did all right. He ends up being the leading passer in the game, which is disappointing for us Steeler fans. Nobody goes over 100 on this one, and you just, you kind of have Pittsburgh eke this one out. It's another win, and that's what I wanted.
I mean, that's what Pittsburgh has been this year, right? It's been ugly every week, but they're finding ways to get the wins. Kenny Pickett, he's been bad in pretty much every game, but when he needs to put a drive together at the end of a game, he gets it done. So it's like, you'll take it, I think, as a Steelers fan, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we said when we did the predictions, I got Steelers going 13-4, and I said that was a little high. I was probably a little biased. And Baltimore is definitely going to have something to say about that. But I have Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and I said it was going to be messy, and I said it was completely schedule dependent. That's exactly why we were going to have this record, was because of the teams we ended up playing. And so far, it's playing out a lot like that. Off to Germany we go. What a beautiful stadium they have in Germany. Oh my gosh, I was so impressed. That's like one of the coolest looking stadiums I've ever seen. Miami, technically at Kansas City, even though they're both in Germany. An ugly game all the way around. Tua ends up as the highest passer and doesn't even get 200 yards. Mahomes, of course, didn't get 200 yards, but at least he had the 2 touchdowns for you. Nobody else gets over 100 yards. Tyreek Hill left off the touchdown list, and we'll get into it later, left off the top 10 list as well. It was ugly. I'm glad they played it in Germany because it looked cool. I don't know. We expected more out of this game, I guess.
Yeah, I thought this would be a more exciting game. It surely was on paper. I didn't really live up to the hype, but, the storyline continues. I mean, the Chiefs' defense this season is absolutely legit. Probably the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had to this point in his career. And the storyline with the Dolphins is they can't beat good teams, apparently. This is going back since last season now. They haven't beaten a team with a winning record this year. I think they lost their last 3 or 4 games last year against teams with winning records. So they are absolutely destroying bad teams. But when the good teams come in, I don't know. I think that's a big concern for the Dolphins.
I forgot to mention that Derrick Henry makes your top 10 fantasy running backs out of that out of the Pittsburgh, Tennessee game. Really, no one makes the list on any list in the top 10 for this Kansas City Miami game. So, everybody, I believe everybody said play everybody. I mean, that's the consensus. We definitely said play everybody. On behalf of all the fantasy predictors out there, we are all sorry. We're not that sorry because we couldn't predict something like that was going to happen, but nobody makes the top 10 anywhere around off that game. Moving on to the Minnesota-Atlanta game. Man, Josh Dobbs' resurgence. Actually not the top passer. He was Minnesota's top rusher at 66 yards. Don't play Madison. Dingus pick of the weeks on TSS Fantasy, as I mentioned. But Taylor Heineke comes out with 268 as the leading passer. Minnesota hangs on to win. People are going to not talk about Atlanta's performance maybe as much as they should, and that's because of Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs showed out. First game in, he's been in the team 5 days, goes in, gets the win, and looked good doing it.
I heard he didn't take a single snap with the first team offense after getting to the team because they weren't planning on using him at all. They were eventually going to use him after, one game with Jaron Hall. But in preparations, he threw no balls to the starting receivers. He, took no plays in the headset from, their offensive coordinators and whatnot. He was completely blind going into it, and he played his ass off like he always does. I mean, Josh Dobbs is a baller. He's not a great quarterback by any means. Don't get that twisted, but He's a competitor. He plays hard, and he's a gamer.
Once a Steeler, always a Steeler. You bring it everywhere you go. Madison actually does make your top 10 running backs, but that's because running back numbers were not fantastic this week. Madison makes top 10 at 17.3 because he received a touchdown and had 49 yards receiving. So he kind of might have saved your day there. Again, don't feel bad about your low score with Madison because he still made the top 10. That's how the running backs turned out this week. We go to Arizona and Cleveland. Not a lot to say here. Deshaun Watson comes back. It's real lucky with his numbers off a nice deflected pass. Amari Cooper had a hell of a day with 139 yards. Nobody on Arizona did squat because Cleveland blanked them. Hope you played Cleveland's defense, and if you had them, you did. And they come out 27-0. I'm not impressed with either of these teams, but Cleveland takes advantage and the defense, carries them through. A little luck carries them through as well.
Yeah, like I had Cleveland defense in one of my fantasy leagues, and in that league they scored like 35 points, I think it was. So, yeah, I mean, big for Cleveland defense. And really the only other thing that this game told anybody is that Clayton Tune is not an NFL quarterback, at least not right now. If he's ever going to be, he has a lot of work to do. But apparently, coming from the Cardinals just yesterday, Kyler Murray is expected to start this week. So we'll see what the Cardinals season looks like from here forward.
I saw an interesting stat on one of the shows. It wasn't Fantasy Flock, but it was one of the associated shows with them that Kyler Murray has not finished below like QB5 or something like that at the end of every season. Something for like the past 4 seasons. Or right now he'd be at QB4 based off his numbers and stuff like that. Like fantasy wise, someone to look at. I'm not sure I'm on that train. I haven't researched it enough, but I saw the stat. I wanted to share the stat. Kyler Murray may be somebody fantasy wise to put on your roster. I don't know about it, but there you go. Let's see. After that, we had the Rams at Green Bay. Love came back. Put what you want in it. It was against the Rams, but Love goes for 228. What we really liked to see personally was Aaron Jones get back on it a little bit, gets 73 yards, gets himself a touchdown. So that was nice to get him back in there, gets himself back on that top 10 list for the week. Other than that, again, kind of an ugly game. And if you have stock in Rams players, you're really not happy right now.
Yeah, but this was always the risk with the Rams, right? That Stafford injury last year. There was a lot of talk this offseason of whether he was going to retire or not, whether he was even going to come back for another year because of all the injuries that have compiled and his body's kind of breaking down on him. So, it's unfortunate, but not surprising that Stafford is hurt. Hopefully he can get back onto the field soon. And you're right, from a fantasy perspective, if you're a Cooper Kupp owner or a Puka Nacua owner, if Stafford is out for a while, that completely tanks the value of those two receivers. Like they'll still put up, some decent numbers, but they're not going to put up Stafford numbers, especially if Brett Rypien's the quarterback.
Yeah, Rypien is not your guy. Rams receivers, I'm just kind of glancing here. I don't see any Rams receivers in the top 40. I think I've gotten down to. I don't see anybody there. So, yeah, it's not going to be good if that continues. Washington at New England. Washington pulls it out. We both got that wrong in the predictions. Here's the thing that you need to know right now. Sam Howell goes for 325. Ends up on the top 10 list again. That's 4 out of 5 weeks, friends. 4 out of 5 weeks on the top 10 list for Sam Howell. Sam Howell, fantasy-wise, is getting it done. Nice stream, nice ad. I'm pretty sure he's pretty much owned at this point, but if you're looking for someone, especially in a super flex league, honestly, F it. Why not even as a starter? Because the guy's top 10 4 out of the last 5 weeks. New England, Ramondre Stevenson finally finds the end zone again, 87 yards again. Nobody receiver running back wise goes over 100 in this one. You got some stats that you needed, some accessory stats in this one, but you didn't win any DFS off this game. Johan Dotson ends up back in the top 10. Johan Dotson having a nice year as well, a nice run. That's 2 weeks in a row in the top 10. And that's the game. That's the game, folks.
Yeah, I mean, Dotson's on a nice little streak. You're right about that. Demario Douglas might be the receiver to own now for the Patriots. I mean, obviously their offense is very weak, but Kendrick Bourne, before suffering the season-ending injury, was a usable wide receiver in fantasy lineups. Demario Douglas now has kind of taken over those targets in the last 2 weeks. So if he's available in your league, he's a fine guy to add off of the waiver wire this week. And Sam Howell, you mentioned him before. He is for sure a weekly starter in
Yeah.
Superflex leagues without a doubt. And he is borderlining now of being, a pretty regular starter in one QB leagues as well. In the right
Mm-hmm.
matchups, he surely is. I mean, you said it. For the last 5 weeks, top 10, numbers don't lie.
There you
Once
go.
could be an outlier, two could be a coincidence, but we're up to four at this point. He's not a great quarterback. I don't believe in him NFL wise,
Right.
but fantasy wise, he puts up some numbers.
Nice DFS run, play, if you will.
Yeah.
He lets you get some big names and
Cheap
still get
upside.
some production. Yeah, absolutely. Ramondre Stevenson ends up at RB2 this week. Wow. Wait till you hear who RB1 was. Blow your mind. Blew mine, and I don't like it one little bit. Chicago at New Orleans. We knew this was going to be, you know, we said, you might get fantasy points out of this. This is going to get messy. Tyson Badgett, look out. We might have a new guy in Chicago because I'll tell you what, he looked better than Fields. Tyson Badgett ends up on the top 10 list almost. Just gets bumped last night. Oh no, he ends up at number 9. I lied. I lied to you guys. Tyson Badgett is number 9 this week, which is nice to see. New names on the list. We now have a total of 32 quarterbacks that have made the top 10 list this week. We're going to throw more stats at you. You won't believe the stats. The stats are coming up next after this review, and they're going to blow your mind. Stick around for the top 10 stats by position. It's crazy. But Badgett gets there and doesn't get it done, but he looked good doing it. He looked good in the loss, and New Orleans comes out with the win because Taysom Hill is on a tear again. Derek Carr is just getting free money right now.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our season preview, right? When we were picking team by team and schedule by schedule, how soft the Saints schedule was in general and how favorable it was for their path to a potential playoff spot in a very bad division with a very easy schedule. Things kind of just lined up nicely for the Saints. And look, like you talked about Bajan, I mean, he definitely looks like a serviceable quarterback. But from what it's sounding like, that may have been his last game, at least for now, because it's starting to sound like Fields is going to start on Thursday in one of the ugliest games of the year to be on primetime, the Panthers and the Bears. Fields was at practice on Saturday, practicing in a limited fashion. He was still ruled out, obviously, for that game against the Saints, but getting him back on the practice field Saturday, the day before a game, kind of suggests that with the short week this week, they wanted to get him a couple of reps because they want to get him out there.
Look, Fields wants to get out there. He's seeing Badgett play, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh crap, I better get the hell
Well,
out
he's
there
playing
before I
for
lose
his
my job.
Of course he wants to get out there.
You better get in. The hell with the game. I didn't want to lose my damn job. I better get out there because Badgett's playing lights out right now. Again, makes himself the top 10 list. Congratulations.
They have the second and third picks right now. The Bears have picks number 2 and number 3 right now. So, Fields has to get out there or it's over.
It was crazy. I was real surprised to see Badgett play like that. And it's New Orleans, but New Orleans defense, they show up. They're very inconsistent. Seattle at Baltimore. Seattle they took the day off. I don't know what the hell happened in Seattle. Seattle just didn't even show up. I think maybe half the team made the flight. I don't know who the hell was on the field. It definitely wasn't the Seattle Seahawks that we've seen all season. Baltimore, they got everybody talking playoffs. They got everybody talking about division. They got everybody talking about a nice run in Baltimore right now off this game. I'm not going to, I don't know if we're going to get too crazy. Division, yeah, that's possible. That was always possible. But Lamar Jackson, he only throws 187, but that passing has never been his calling card. The story of the game is the running back room. Keaton Mitchell out of nowhere, probably going to be like a huge waiver wire pickup this week. I think that's maybe a bit premature, but he absolutely goes ham this week. Ends up at RB number 5, 138 yards on 9 carries. That's 15 yards a carry, guy. 15 yards a carry for Keaton Mitchell. He just went off. He had his opportunity and he made the best of it. Gus Edwards gets bumped last night to running back 11, but we almost had two Baltimore running backs on the top 10 list. They finished at 5 and 11. That was the story of the game right there. There's really not much else that people are talking about after that game.
Keaton Mitchell's an interesting story. He was one of the guys who had a lot of off-season buzz and then some training camp buzz, and there was a lot of, stories going around that the Ravens really like this kid, and he's got elite speed and great explosiveness, but then he kind of got buried on the depth chart because of how many running backs the Ravens have, and then he dealt with an injury for a little bit, so he was out there. He finally gets his first opportunity, and I mean, he really showed what the Ravens were excited about, that they weren't bluffing in the offseason. It's a little bit similar to the Dolphins with Devon Achane, right? It's a little bit similar to that kind of deal where he's been hurt, he's been buried on the depth chart, but when he got his opportunities, he was looking like one of the best running backs in the NFL for a couple of weeks. Speed kills, we know that. Explosiveness really goes a long way, especially for fantasy. Guys that are really explosive, you need less touches to have upside. So that's a great thing to have.
Then we had like the fantasy game of the week. Tampa at Houston. If you had, I mean, we didn't say play them all. I know we didn't because I am not a Rachaad White fan. I'm not a Tampa fan. Houston, obviously, but wow. If you had fantasy players in this game, you did well, aside from Dameon Pierce. Nobody should have that guy on the roster ever. But your QB1, CJ Stroud, obviously 470 yards, 5 stinking touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's the big stat for me from CJ Stroud. The 470, great. 5 touchdowns, holy crap. 0 interceptions in this game. That's what I like to see. Ends up with 41.8 points, completely skews the numbers. Taints the grading scale on this one. CJ Stroud, wow. DFS plays probably did real well with CJ Stroud this week. But Baker Mayfield finishes at QB8. Running back number 1 off this game, Rachaad White. Never would have guessed it. Never would have recommended. Never in my life. I hate Rachaad White as a fantasy player. Not as a person, as a fantasy player. Finishes RB1. Fed me a big fat help and a crow this week. The wide receiver room was all Houston. Tank Dell, wide receiver 1. Noah Brown, wide receiver 3. Nico Collins, wide receiver 13. That's 3 receivers from the same team in the top 13 in fantasy points. You got to be kidding me right now how that comes out. And, don't forget tight end number 1 this week, Dalton Schultz off of Houston. That's technically 4 wide receivers. That's 4 guys catching the ball who end up at the number 1 spot. And, just a little for the highlight reel, if you didn't see it, Ogunbowale kicks a field goal in the game really, it was the game-winning field goal, if you will, for this contest. It goes out there you go. The guy does everything.
Now, I want to see someone share a screenshot with us of Dare Ogunbowale in your lineup. If anyone had him in the lineup, if anyone's out there, I want to see it.
There's no way.
I have to see it. I'm not taking your word for it. I got to see it. But yeah, CJ Stroud, we touched on it last week that, he's not just the best rookie quarterback so far this year. He's quickly climbing the overall QB rankings around the NFL right now. It's not just like a hot start anymore. I think this is what CJ Stroud is. It's been half of a season. We're at the halfway point, by the way. We got 9 weeks down, 9 weeks to go. We're at the official halfway point now, and the kid looks awesome. That game he just had against the Bucs, statistically, you can make a case that was the best rookie performance by a quarterback in NFL history. So Stroud, his upside's to the moon. And again, I've said this a couple times about Stroud too. Let's remember too, he's not throwing it to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle or, Chase or Jefferson. Right. This is Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Noah Brown. These guys would be wide receiver 3s on most rosters at best. Yeah. On some teams, these guys wouldn't even really be getting on the field and be a part of their offense. So, they've done a good job in these elevated roles, not trying to take anything away from them, but it's just to give Stroud even more credit that this is not a talented offense that he's playing in compared to other teams, and he's still lighting it up.
Yeah, he's making it talented. He's making it very talented.
Yeah.
They ran a story that Stroud wanted Dell. Stroud didn't have a lot, obviously doesn't have anything to say about the conversation, but they talked to him, he's going to be their quarterback. He said, I want to take Dell. Go get this kid. And the chemistry is there. OHIO, we finally might have a quarterback coming out of Ohio State. It's nice to see. Indianapolis at Carolina. In Carolina, Indianapolis gets it done. Nobody looked fantastic in this game, but Indianapolis grinds it out. Bryce Young looked honestly horrible, but actually is the leading passer as far as yardage goes in this game with 173. That tells you how bad when your leading passer for the game has 173 yards. Obviously, there's not a lot of fantasy value that came out of this game, nor did we really think there would be. And like you said, Carolina plays on Thursday against the Bears. Doesn't sound very exciting, but we'll get into that later. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about this one. I guess, for a fantasy aspect, Jonathan Taylor continues to assert his dominance over Moss. But other than that, I guess that's really where we're at for this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the who cares game of the week, right? It was just pretty irrelevant overall. I mean, I guess the only thing I'll add is that it seems pretty evident at this point that Chuba Hubbard is the Panthers' RB1, not Miles Sanders anymore. So, I guess that's worth noting. But besides
not that he's doing anything for you. Not that he's going to do anything for you at all.
No,
not at all.
Maybe against the Bears.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's a fair point. I did see a stat that Indianapolis has scored 20 or more points in every game this season. So they got that going for them anyway. Yeah, How about that? Where are we going next? New York at Las Vegas. We knew New York was bad. We didn't know they were this bad. Las Vegas dominates this game. Doesn't help that Daniel Jones goes out for the season, it looks like.
Yeah.
Which, look, the guy's been sacked 30 times in 6 games. That's 5 times a game. 26 years old. It doesn't matter. You get sacked that many times. If you go back and look at these sacks, someone's going to throw together a highlight reel. I'm sure they already have. If you go back and look at these sacks, he's not getting just knocked down. Dude's getting lit up. Out of those 30 sacks, probably 20, 22 are bell ringers. He's getting destroyed out there when he gets hit. Anyway, Las Vegas comes in. Jones goes out, probably for good. Aiden O'Connell gets the win, 30 points. Still nobody over 100 in this one. Wait till you get when I do the stats. Wait till you hear the stats on the 100-yard games this week. Josh Jacobs almost gets there with 98. And really the biggest story here is Daniel Jones and the fact that Vegas won.
Yeah, and the fact that, new regime now in Las Vegas, Josh McDaniels out, Antonio Pierce takes over. And look, the Raiders played inspired in this game. This is the best that the Raiders have looked this year. And look, playing the Giants can have that effect on teams, right? You play the Giants and everybody kind of
when you just cleaned out. Giants.
Right. But this is a confidence building game. This is, the new guys here. We have hope again. And look, if you're a Raiders player, you look at your record right now, and you're not completely out of it. No, you're really not. If you can string a couple of wins together here, you can get right back in that wild card race, which in the AFC, really in both conferences, is very gettable right now. Around 500 kind of has you right in that mix. So if you're a game or so out, back of 500, you're still in the race. Like I just mentioned before, we're only halfway through the season. Halfway down, another half to go. So, if I'm the Raiders, I'm definitely inspired. The Giants, look, they completely failed Daniel Jones. And look, it isn't for lack of trying. They've invested in that offensive line. They drafted Andrew Thomas. They drafted Evan Neal, 2 very high draft picks at tackle. But some of this is offensive scheme too, right? Can we chip a pass rusher for the Giants? Can we get Daniel Jones a little extra protection? Because I agree with you 100%. It's not that he's just getting sacked a million times a game. There are 3 runners untouched. Every play, it feels like. It's insane. And they're not even blitzing. It's a shame. And Hey, look, I mean, we talked about Fields needs to play for his job. There's also that possibility now that was Daniel Jones's last game as their starting quarterback.
That's very
Because the
possible.
Giants right now, I believe they have the fourth overall pick. And let's remember too, Joe Shane, general manager, Brian Daboll, head coach, did not draft Daniel Jones. They inherited Daniel Jones.
This is
Usually,
true.
new head coaches and GMs like to draft their own guy. They like to pick their own quarterback, right? They're
Mhm.
going to probably have a top 5 pick this year, especially if they're starting Tommy DeVito the rest of the way. I mean, he doesn't look like an NFL quarterback either, and it sounds like he's their starter the rest of the way. He's at least going to be this week against the Cowboys in Dallas, by the way. They're going to get
Oh,
slaughtered.
it's gonna be
So, I
bad.
mean,
It's gonna be real
Giants are
bad.
another team now that it's fair to start talking about. Are they in the mix for Caleb Williams or Drake May or Michael Penix or one of these big name quarterbacks? Interesting thing to watch.
Dallas loses another one on the road. Just not great if they're not in their dome. But I mean, we got the game that we wanted, that we kind of expected. Uh, we knew. I'm not going to say we. I felt that Philly was going to win this game. I feel like Philly's more of a complete team. We'll talk about some of the stats in just a second. But Dak Prescott, gosh darn, did he do his very best. Quarterback number 2, fantasy wise, gets 3 touchdowns. Darn near had it at the end. CD just couldn't get it in there, and he really threw it the only place he could throw it. And the fact that he made that completion in the first place, well done. Dak Prescott had a fantastic game in this one. We know all the Eagles had a fantastic game. CeeDee Lamb went ridiculous, 191 yards. No touchdown, though. And for me, the stat line that I want to talk about, well, let's talk about the fantasy real quick. Jalen Hurts comes in at QB3. So in this game, you had QB2 and QB3 in the same game. That doesn't happen very often, but it shows you what kind of game we had. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is fantastic. A.J. Brown makes the top 10 list yet again, as he's been doing every week for the past 4 weeks. Your star showed up. Devonta Smith is wide receiver 15, but I mean, three good catches, 3 for 3 again, 100%. Beautiful touchdown catch there in the first half. Just really nice. But the thing I keep reiterating, it was on Dingus Picks of the Weeks, Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard so hyped, supposed to be RB 5 this year, and still hasn't had a touchdown since week 1. Still, hasn't gone over 100 yards, but one time. Single digits again for fantasy, 51 yards in this one. It's I don't know what's going on. I don't know if the game script is because they keep getting behind. Tony Pollard just not there on your fantasy rosters. But great game by Dallas. Better game by Philadelphia. Philly gets a win that will matter at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, remember when Mike McCarthy said before the season when he took over the play calling duties after firing Kellen Moore? All he said was, "We're going to run the damn ball, and we're
Yeah.
going to run it some more and run it some more and run it some more." That's not what they've done this year. They've
Not
been
a thing.
passing the damn ball and passing it and passing it and passing it. Which, look, I mean, Pollard, I'm disappointed in his season so far. I had very high hopes for Tony Pollard, but it's one of the things we talked about. There's a big difference between being the truly featured running back on a team, which he's never done before in his career. He's always worked either behind Zeke or in tandem with Zeke. And then there were a couple games where, Zeke was out that he was featured, but a game here and there is way different than carrying the load of an entire season. And, I hate to say it, but, like maybe Pollard wasn't cut out for that. Maybe that's something the Cowboys need to address in the offseason if they're going to keep Pollard, who's on the franchise tag, by the way, so there's no
There you
guarantee that
go.
he's coming back. But if he does come back, they might need to add another running back to kind of work in tandem with him. And look, this game, I agree with you. The Eagles are the better team right now than the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, so the Eagles were supposed to win this game,
Mm-hmm.
especially playing at home. As a
That
Cowboys
that was
fan,
a big deal.
of course, I'm a little disappointed that they lost. But I got to say, I'm pretty happy with the way that they played, the way that they competed.
Oh, you
Dak
have to be.
Prescott showed up in a big spot in a big moment, which has obviously been the big knock on Dak, right? That he plays
Yep.
great until he really has to play great, and then he doesn't. he played fantastic in this one. This is not on Dak Prescott at all. We got right down there at the end of the game with a chance to win. He got sacked. We had a penalty. And then that last play, instead of being from like the 5 or 10-yard line, was all the way back at like the 30-yard line, which, obviously makes a huge difference on a do or die type of play. But Dak showed up for this one. And as a Cowboys fan, I'm inspired too that, yes, the Eagles, look, like if you're making power rankings of the NFL, the Eagles have to be at the top of every single power ranking right now. They are the number one team. For sure. And then, you got like the Chiefs and Ravens are, right up there too. But it's the Eagles right now. But it shows me that the Cowboys are not far behind. The Cowboys played very well in this game. So did the Eagles. The Eagles didn't play bad. Both teams played great. And the Cowboys were just behind them. So there's not a big gap there. And the Cowboys are still right in it.
Yeah, don't get too much on the Cowboys. Blow it all just yet, because we are gonna talk about the Cowboys in the Hulse of the week coming up. Just 2 more games to get through for this one. Cincinnati and Buffalo. Buffalo at Cincinnati. Cincinnati, Burrow is back. Buffalo's defense is non-existent. Josh Allen doing everything he can. Josh Allen comes up as your leading rusher. So besides the lack of defense in Buffalo, there's your other story in Buffalo, that Josh Allen is your leading rusher. Joe Burrow for 348, T. Higgins for 110. I don't think this game was ever really in doubt if you watched it. What I watched of it, I never felt that Cincinnati was going to lose this game at all. I knew Buffalo would try. Stephon Diggs, fantasy-wise, Diggs gets it done for you. Josh Allen gets it done for you. Actually finishes at QB4, Burrow QB6. You had some help. Chase, not a fantastic game. He's kind of boom or bust right now. But, again, Cincinnati, I just didn't feel like was really ever in danger of losing this game.
No, yeah, they kind of controlled the game kind of right from the start. I mean, it was a very competitive game start to finish.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Just the feeling of the game always felt like Burrow was in full control and kind of had the upper hand the whole way. And he's fully back. I mean, he is 100% back at this point. He was scrambling around in this game. He looked great. And I was never worried about the Bengals. They've come up a lot, in our early week shows because of how bad they've looked and this and that. And I've always said, their only issue is health. It's Burrow's health in particular, but T. Higgins was hurt as well. He looks like he's healthy and he's back as well. The Bengals are a very scary team now for this second half of the season. They look like the Bengals that they were supposed to be.
Absolutely. I love seeing it. You love to see Burrow back. And then we had the Monday night game last night. Eckler had a fine game. The Chargers were up against that Jets defense. That Jets defense showed up. I actually got knocked out of my Guillotine League thanks to this game, because I had Herbert, I had Quentin, I had Breece Hall, and game script wouldn't allow Breece Hall to do anything. And once Chargers got up, they had no reason to throw the ball. So I was reliant on the passing game. I didn't need a lot, but that Jets defense, just nobody's getting anything on those guys. Those guys are so legit right now.
Yeah, all this game told me is what I already knew, that the Jets defense is awesome and Zach Wilson sucks. It's nothing different about this game than anything we already knew going into this year, right?
Yeah, Zach Wilson comes out as a leading passer, at least in this one, thanks to his defense. 263. That's a respectable day.
He was trailing by 2 touchdowns the whole game.
The whole game. That's how it usually happens. Fantasy-wise, Zach Wilson's not horrible. He's not the worst guy you could have. You're not making him your QB1 or anything like that by any means.
I saw a rough stat. We've thrown out a couple fun little stats on this show. I just saw this morning that over the last 5 years, the Jets have 16 games without scoring a touchdown. The next closest team is the Giants. They only have 9 such games. So the Jets have about twice as many as any other team. 16 games over the last 5 years that they didn't score a touchdown.
That's insane.
Embarrassing. Yeah.
Let's go to the pulse check and see what's going on and how Adam feels about it around the NFL. Or do you want to do the stats first? Do you want to hear the stats and then do the pulse check?
Let's just put a bow on this week, I guess.
You want me to do the stats? Let's do the stats.
Yeah,
Stats
wrap it up.
You won't believe it. Let's get statted up. I will make that better. I made that in 10 minutes this morning. I'm not going to lie to you. Statted Up brought to you by TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Find out who you need to get, who you need to pick up, and who you don't. Every Tuesday night with TSS Fantasy right here on the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel. Statted Up. Let's throw some stats at you that are going to blow your mind and change the way you look at your fantasy season this week. Look, we know Stroud ended up as QB1. We got 32 quarterbacks now that have made the top 10 list so far. Welcome, Badgett. Probably the only time you'll get here. I'm sorry to hear that because you've been playing lights out. Look, no QB has repeated as fantasy QB1 still. We bring that up every week. It still hasn't happened. Hurts is on an 8-week streak for the top 10. Allen is 7 total. Hurts hasn't finished outside the top. Finished outside of the top 5 for since week 4. Hurts has been there. So if you drafted Hurts, you're real happy. If you drafted Allen, you're real happy. He's got 7 trips on this top 10. Only 7 QBs have gone over 30 points this year 8 times. Allen did it twice. That's it. All year. It's only gone over 30 points 7 times. Sam Howell is on 4 out of 5 games in the top 10 and currently sits at QB6. QB6, Sam Howell. Tell me you called that one. You didn't. You're a liar. 3 rookies make the top 10 this week, and 1 first-timer in Josh Dobbs at Minnesota. Looked fantastic. Burrow 2 weeks in a row in the top 10. Only Badgett, Mayfield, and Prescott are 3 out of 4 weeks. Lamar, 2 weeks in a row not on the top 10. That's because they're actually using the running backs now. And 2 Baltimore running backs inside the top 11 this week. Speaking of running backs, again, no running back, 0, have finished inside or finished as RB1 2 weeks in a row. Only 9 running backs this season. The running backs are not where you're getting your points this year. Okay, so don't feel bad that you have low scoring running backs. Okay, only 9 running backs have gone over 30 points. Mostert has repeated. Dolphins running back room has been fantastic. ETN has been top 5 in his last 4 games. Top 5, not top 10, top 5 in the last 4 games. He also leads with most trips to the top 10 with 6 weeks. This is the first time in 6 weeks that Kimura has not made the top 10. So, don't expect that to keep on. 40 different running backs have made the top 10, but no more than 10 running backs have gone over 20 points in a week. That is an amazing stat to me. So in 1 week, no more than 10 running backs have gotten 20 or more points. It hasn't happened. Running backs, Rachaad White, of course, gets your number 1 this week. As we mentioned, nobody has repeated, but Rachaad White, top 10 2 weeks in a row. Wouldn't have guessed it. Pollard still not doing great. Here's the stat for this week. This week we had 5 running backs go over 20 points. Last week we had 8. This week we had 1 running back break the 100-yard mark. 1 running back in the entire league got over 100 yards rushing. Running backs trying to make a case for themselves. That's probably not how you do it. Wide receivers, 48 wide receivers have made the top 10 list in fantasy points, but only Keenan Allen has repeated as wide receiver 1 back in weeks 2 and 3. So nobody's repeated since then, but at least somebody has done it for the wide receivers. Nobody's done anywhere else. A.J. Brown's on a 4-game streak. He's made the list 5 times. Johan Dotson and CeeDee Lamb are the only wide receivers currently on a streak, and that's because they've done it 2 weeks in a row. Here's the thing. Wide receivers are so diverse that nobody has been on a streak. All right? Other than A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill, of course, Stephon Diggs is the only wide receiver to put together a streak of 3 games. Everybody else, nobody's gone more than 2 weeks in a row on the list. You got 10 active wide receivers who've managed to string 2 weeks together, but that's it. That's it. That's how diverse the wide receiver room is. You talk about needing to be able to work the waiver wire to finish your fantasy season. Wide receivers cannot make it more apparent as the fact that nobody can seem to put 2 weeks together other than A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill. Although Tyreek Hill's first time off the list since week 5. Been on the list every week. Been in the top 5. Every time he's been on the list, he's been in the top 5, which is 6 times. This week, no Tyreek Hill. Lamb, A.J. Brown, Johan Dotson have been here 2 weeks or more in a row. We talked about that. These are some big stats. They tell a big story. And now you guys are statted up. No running backs over 100 yards. None. Couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's just the general feeling of, the inconsistencies with the top 10 that, you've been pointing out is it just seems like offenses are spreading the ball around a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. Using multiple running backs, trying to get that quality over quantity of touches, right? Where like the idea, like, if you're giving your back 30 touches a game, there's going to be a lot of low quality touches in that mix, but fresh legs make a difference. Like it seems like, offenses are almost adopting, the popular, thing that teams do with pass rushers, right? Rotate your pass rushers so that they're always fresh legs and, more explosive and this and that and whatever. It seems like kind of wide receivers, running backs, they're kind of trying to do the same thing there, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, to support that, CeeDee Lamb, the only receiver with double-digit receptions this week. The next one, he had 11. The next highest is 8 with T. Higgins. With a couple of receivers, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr. with 8 receptions. Only 5 wide receivers got over 100 yards this week. We talked about only 1 running back. Only 5 wide receivers got over 100 yards. So, I mean, it's getting spread around. And Patrick Mahomes is a perfect example. I think he used like 9 different pass catchers this week, if I heard that right. And that's what they've been doing the entire time. Stay out of the wide receiver room in Kansas City. I said it. You said it. I mean, we all said it before, and people still drafted Kansas City wide receivers. Don't do it. Don't do it.
And hype them up, right? Sleeper pick of the year, Sky Moore. Make sure you have Kadarius Toney on your rosters. I mean, it's 2 years in a row now with the Chiefs. That's kind of been the story since they moved on from Tyreek Hill. They're not going to feature receivers in their offense. They have a scheme, and they're literally just finding speedy wide receivers and guys who can be vertical threats because that's the Andy Reid offensive system, right? He did the same thing when he was with the Eagles. What receivers did Donovan McNabb have besides that short time with Terrell Owens? He was throwing to guys like James Thrash was his leading receiver, like people don't even remember James Thrash, again, that is the Andy Reid way. Get speed on offense and let your quarterback do the work.
There's another guy that was fairly successful with all that plug and play stuff out of New England. I don't know. He's not doing so great right now, but that guy did okay with all that plug and play.
Troy Brown, Deion Branch, those were like leading receivers over there, right?
You know who started it? Well, I'm not going to say started it, but kind of made it famous. Bill Parcells.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Parcells, famously known for using what he had, recognizing talent management. We call it in today's business world. He looked at his talent, figured out who could do what the best, and that's what he had them do, and didn't have them do anything else. Never asked anybody to do.
Well, that's where Belichick learned it from, right? Absolutely. Parcells was Belichick's mentor for many, many years, and obviously Belichick was the defensive coordinator for those great Giants teams in the '90s. Yep. In the LT days. So yeah, you're spot on with that for sure.
Let's get into the Hulse check. Hulse check with Adam Hulse, brought to you by us. That EFIN Morning After Show, we're here every Tuesday morning. You can call in live. That option is open, by the way. You guys are more than welcome to call in. I should probably throw that up there. But we're here every Tuesday. Come join us. We recap your fantasy week and get into the next one. Right now, we're going to do the Hulse check. I'm going to throw some things to Adam Hulse. This is not rehearsed. He's going to give us his thoughts and comments and whatnots on some of the big storylines going on.
I have not seen the topics. This is blind. This is quick fire. This is Up
first. That's why I didn't want you to blow your. Up first, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott gets a bad rap, and he's earned it. All right, but Dak Prescott is QB 11 in fantasy right now. He's QB 11 in overall, QB 11 in yards, QB 10 in touchdowns. All right, he's QB 8 in sacks. He's been sacked 22 times, but it could be worse. It could be much, much worse. You could be Sam Howell. You could be Daniel Jones. And he's only thrown 5 interceptions. He told us he was going to throw fewer interceptions this year. So far, he's come through. He's thrown a couple ones at the wrong time. But Adam Hulse, is this it? Is this a year? Can Dak get over it?
I think he can. Look, coming away with the win against the Eagles, that really would kind of flip that narrative that he can't beat big teams in big spots. But, kind of like I touched on before, this was not Dak Prescott's fault. He played fantastic in that game. And, the issue always was that not just that the Cowboys lose these big games in big spots, but that Dak doesn't show up. He throws interceptions. He goes under 200 yards. He completes 50% of his passes, stuff like that when he's facing these elite teams. That was not the story here. He elevated his level of play to the level of competition, which is what the great quarterbacks do, right? I mean, look at what Joe Burrow did against the Bills. He knows that's an important game. He was fantastic in that game. You have to play up when you're playing the elite teams. If pressure, big spots, the great ones play better in those moments than they do without. And the story with Dak is that he plays worse in those moments. But this was not the case against the Eagles.
Running backs. Adam. With the increase of the zero RB strategy, RB's trying to make a case for themselves that they are not just plug-and-play players, which may only be true for CMC right now. Every week, except for week 2. Week 2 statistically was the anomaly of this week. You talk about throwing out the highs. Week 2 was the one. So other than week 2, we have anywhere from 11 to 14 out of the entire league. 11 to 14 running backs get over 15 points a week. Not 20, 15. 15 points a week. Only 11 to 14 running backs are doing it. If you want over 20, you better have one of the top 5 to 8. Because that's all that's doing it every week. Are running backs playing themselves out of fantasy relevancy? Are they playing themselves out of the first 4 rounds right now?
There's always going to be exceptions, right? Like you said, McCaffrey, when Eckler's healthy, he can be an exception too. You mentioned ETN before is having an excellent season. But, I have to say, just from my own experience, my fantasy teams this year that are performing the best, and it's by a wide margin, are the teams that I went zero RB with. The teams that I drafted running backs early and often using like the old school strategy, those are my teams that are struggling a little bit more. So, zero RB is definitely a real thing, and it makes sense with these offenses using multiple running backs in their teams, It's not like it used to be where teams have like this featured back who gets 80+% of the touches, there used to be a Derrick Henry type workload on just about every team. Those days are long gone, and it's been a long time since those days have been here. And newsflash, they're not coming back. It's more likely that teams start using 3 running backs before they start using 1 running back again. So yeah, like I'm all in for, next year again, with the exception of just a few. I'm down with the zero RB. I like going, wide receivers early for sure. And I mean, look, I was in a difficult spot this week in a super flex league with missing a whole bunch of quarterbacks. My depth was not good there, and Daniel Jones being knocked out was kind of the final nail in the coffin. So I'll say it right now. I made a trade that admittedly I probably lose. It was partially out of desperation. I traded Christian McCaffrey for CeeDee Lamb and Sam Howell.
I mean,
and I'm okay with it. With it.
You're okay.
Now, on paper, if you have to pick a winner of that trade, McCaffrey's the winner of that trade.
You offered me that trade. I smashed yes before I finished reading.
Yeah. But like, I was comfortable enough doing it, needing a quarterback. Sam Howell, we talked about him a lot on this show. And
Mm-hmm.
CeeDee Lamb, he's getting targeted unbelievably right now. He's getting Cooper Cup level target numbers right now. Like, it's unbelievable. So again, it's a trade I'm comfortable with, though I'm not going to try to brag that I won that trade, but given the situation, and that kind of speaks to the value of receivers versus running backs, right?
Yeah.
McCaffrey, the clear cut number one overall guy, and I was okay letting him go because I'm getting an elite receiver and a quarterback with a ton of upside.
I mean, CMC's made the list 6 times. He's tied for the lead in the top 10 list, top five of those times, 5 of those 6 times. But CeeDee Lamb, CMC's on a bye this week. CeeDee Lamb finishes wide receiver 1 last week, wide receiver 2 this week. It's a fair trade. And then the fact you pull quarterback 6, fantasy quarterback 6, Sam Howell out of the deal as well. Again, it hurts to give up CMC, but like you said, I mean, it's a deal that could be made and made sense doing it. In contrast to the
Before the year, that deal would be blasphemy, right?
oh yeah, oh
Like,
absolutely,
I would have got shafted in terms of before the year type of value. But when you really look at it right now, I mean, it's a trade that, again, I'll admit the CMC side is the better side, but it's comparable.
it is no, and it could pay off. Here's the comparison. Since you bring up the word, we talked about above 15 running backs. You got to have like one of the top 13 running backs to get above 15. You only need one of the top 20 on average for wide receivers. 2022. If you're in the top 22 wide receivers, you're above 15 points. If you're in the top 12 wide receivers, you're probably over 20 points in the week. So I mean, it just shows the contrast between the positions. I mean, we know the NFL is going to a passing game right now. They've been making that transition very obviously, steadily, but obviously over the years, and that's why running backs are starting to see the writing on the wall. Stats like these don't help. One more thing on the Hulse check, we've got Daniel Jones out, and obviously this new guy probably isn't going to get it done, so we're interested to see who's going to come in. Cousins comes out, Dobbs fills the role. Wilson, he's won some games, but he's not the answer. How many more quarterbacks can the NFL stand before it's just out of control? I mean, we've got rookies replacing rookies. We've got Minshew replacing Richardson. There's a lot of replacement QBs in right now. I mean, how many are we going to finish with at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, it's reaching like record-setting type levels of how many different starting quarterbacks have started the game this year. It was like 2 weeks ago that there was like 9 quarterbacks playing that weren't their week one starters for their
Yeah.
teams. I mean, it's been pretty crazy, and a lot of it has been injury related, which we know injuries keep going up in the NFL as well. But I mean, a lot of them though have kind of played pretty well. Like, some of them have been good storylines, right? Josh Dobbs, perfect example of that, getting thrust into, the starting role for the Cardinals. Didn't win more than one game, but looked great in a lot of those losses and always competed, right? I mean, something like the Falcons, Ritter gets benched for Heineke. I think me and you both knew Heineke was always the better quarterback than
Yes.
Ritter. But it's
Yes.
fair that the Falcons wanted to see what they had in Ritter. They did draft him 2 years ago. They
Ritter
gave him
didn't
his
play
shot.
horrible. He made the
Well,
top 10 list 3
fantasy-wise,
times.
he didn't play horrible. Yeah. Fantasy-wise, Ritter was definitely a serviceable, deep superflex, bye-week replacement
3
type of
times in the first
quarterback.
6 weeks. He's there.
Yeah. But, I don't disagree with the Falcons turning it over to Heineke because they can win this division. Like, the Saints aren't running away with it.
Yes,
It's a
at all.
gettable division, so it's like, let's go for it. And Heineke gives them a better chance to win. And doesn't Heineke do this everywhere he goes?
Everywhere. I love it.
He
I
gets
love this
signed to
kid.
be a backup. He gets signed to be a backup everywhere he goes and eventually becomes the starter and outplays the guy that he was backing up.
And he's just so excited to play. That's what I love about the guy. The guy's just so excited to put his hand on a football during a game. But I mean, to your point, we look at the top 10 list this year. Badgett, we out of we got 32 different quarterbacks that make the list this year. Badgett is on there. Levis is on there. Tyrod Taylor is on there. Minshew is on there as someone who comes in to fill a role. Dalton is on there. I mean, these are guys that are backups. These are guys that just had to step in, and they make the top 10 list. When I've got 32 different quarterbacks on there, but they're not all starting quarterbacks, it kind of shows you what we're dealing with in the NFL today as far as injuries and backups, and just you never know. Why streaming?
This is just another thing too that just shows me how bad Zach Wilson is, right? I mean, like, is Zach Wilson even like a top 50 quarterback in the NFL right now? It's crazy.
The guy's played the whole season, hasn't made the list once. Badgett steps into 2 games, he's on there. Levis makes it his first week. Tyrod Taylor steps in a game, he makes
There's a lot of backups in the NFL right now that I'd rather have than Zach Wilson. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Some of them haven't even really played this year, like your Jameis Winston, for example. I'd take him over Zach Wilson any day.
Poor kid, he got set up. It was a trap. It's a trap. Let's get into it. I still haven't made. I made I don't know, a card for the stats. I still haven't made a card for the upcoming games. But let's talk about the upcoming games and who may or may not be good to play this week. We got Carolina at Chicago and kind of a snooze fest. I guess you could, I mean, I don't know. I don't like playing Thursday night players anyway. And whatever. I will say this, Carolina, nobody's doing very well receiver-wise against Carolina, so you might temper your expectations on DJ Moore this week. I know you want to play him. I know you've been waiting to play him. I know you see Carolina, you're like, yes, but go back and look. Receivers are not doing well against Carolina this year. I don't know why. They're just not.
I'm sitting everybody for the Bears, personally. I have no urge to play DJ Moore. I mean, honestly, if it's Bagent, I'm more interested in more than if it's Fields, because Fields' injury is on the thumb of his throwing hands. So I need to see if he can actually throw the ball first before I'm putting DJ Moore in lineups. Can't even start Deontay
Not that he threw it great in the first place.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. Can't even start Deontay Foreman this week because it sounds like Khalil Herbert is probably going to come off the IR and play this week. So you can't play any of the running backs. Like, I want nothing to do with the Bears this week, even with them playing at home against the Panthers. Still want nothing to do with any of the Bears. When it comes to the Panthers, I'll start Thielen. I'll maybe start Chuba in a flex spot if there's bye week stuff or injury stuff going on. But besides that, I have no interest in this game.
Frankfurt Stadium welcomes the offensive powerhouses of Indianapolis and the New England Patriots. Boy, they got robbed on this one. But Indianapolis, again, has not scored less than 20 points in a game. New England probably hasn't given up less than 20 points in a game. I don't know. But, I guess, you got to play Taylor, right? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you play Taylor. And I mean, look, maybe it's a good thing that this isn't a soccer stadium because this might look like a soccer score when it's all done.
That's a fantastic take on that one. Houston at Cincinnati. Which CJ Stroud will show up? I think Cincinnati's defense is going to be able to handle this one. Houston, they give him a game. But honestly, I think you can still play some of your Houston. I mean, you're not playing Noah Brown. You never, ever play Dameon Pierce. But your Cincinnati players, I definitely think you can play. Houston's defense, they're not, the worst in the league, but they're not fantastic either.
Yeah, I mean, Stroud can be started at this point. Nico Collins should be in your lineup every week at this point.
And I think Tank Dell.
Yeah, I mean, Tank Dell's like the borderline guy, right? Because he just had this big explosion this week. He did literally nothing for his last 3 games before that after being pretty good in the beginning of the year. So, he's like your, borderline flex type of play, in my opinion. And, one guy I don't think we've talked about enough, Dalton Schultz, is very quietly over the past few games. He's been one of the best tight ends in fantasy football over his last couple of games. He has been very good. This wasn't just like a flash in the pan week. He's getting targeted. He's putting up production. The Bengals, by the way, not good at all in defending tight ends. They're one of the worst in allowing fantasy points per game to tight ends. Dalton Schultz, I love as a play this week.
I like it. I mean, you're right. He has been doing, it's like you said, quietly
Yep.
doing, getting it done. Finishes not so quiet this week as tight end number one. Uh,
Mm.
but, I mean, they're using him, and CJ Stroud did always kind of use his tight ends anyway. Not so, 8 was the bye, but 7, week 7, Schultz is in there, middle of the pack. I mean, defensive wise, both these guys are middle of the pack pass defense. Cincinnati's actually got a really bad rush defense, but still, I will never tell you to play Damian Pierce. I'll never set you up like that. What do we got next? New Orleans at Minnesota. Josh Dobbs at home in Minnesota. I look for another repeat performance. He's going to get comfortable with his starters. I think Addison is going to be worth playing this week. New Orleans defense is beatable. Josh Dobbs is on a high for New Orleans. I look for Kamara to get back on that top 10 list. First time in 6 weeks he didn't make it this week, but I look for him to get back. I don't know if you cannot play Taysom Hill right now and expect something
Right.
DFS wise, obviously. They're hidden, I think, in this one, but there are fantasy points to be found here.
Yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill's averaging like 15 points per game or something like that over his last 3. So he's another one quietly been excellent. I like this game for fantasy. Like I kind of like using the guys on both of these teams for the most part because I think this could, sneaky be kind of a high scoring type of game. I mean, my big question though is who's starting Josh Dobbs this week, right? I mean, in Superflex, he's a legitimate option in Superflex leagues. You can't start him in one QB leagues. Like he's not really an option for me in that kind of situation. But in Superflex, you can get Dobbs in your lineup. Why not?
I've been saying start Josh Hobbs. I picked him up in a multi-quarterback league. Yeah, I've been saying start Josh Hobbs for sure. Sam Howell's the story, but Josh Dobbs definitely worth a play. Green Bay at Pittsburgh. Again, I got Pittsburgh in double-digit wins because of their schedule. This is another one. I like Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh because Green Bay's defense is not great. Aaron Jones is not, he finally gets back on the top 10 list, but he's not playing fantastic either. Jordan Love has shown that he can have a really crappy game, and I think Pittsburgh can give him the pressure to do just that. I don't know about fantasy-wise. You're going to play Pickens, obviously. That's probably about it in this one, but I like Pittsburgh for the win anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you can play Deontay too. He's been good since coming back from the injury.
I don't know. I feel like it's a trap. He makes the top 10 this week, but he still only had 90 yards. He did finally get in the end zone, so maybe now that he's broke the seal, maybe you're right.
7 receptions, though, I believe, right? And I mean, that's been Deontay over the last couple of years. Is it's all volume, right? Yeah. Like he gets a lot of targets and a lot of receptions, which pretty much every fantasy league is PPR these days. So that's why Deontay Johnson has been a good one. But in general, for this game, I hate this game for fantasy. Yeah. I really do. I think this is going to be another one of those ugly, low-scoring, grinded-out kind of games for the Steelers where in the end they win like 20-16 or something along those lines.
Craziness. Tennessee at Tampa Bay. Normally I would say, like, I hate this game for fantasy, but Tampa Bay's been turning it up a little bit. Again, Rachaad White makes the top 10 list. He's another one I will never, ever, ever, ever tell you to play Rachaad White, and Tennessee's run defense is not horrible. But, I have to give credit where credit is due, and Tampa Bay's been getting it done. I don't know if they're getting it done enough that you have to play them, but if you get stuck into playing them, it's not so bad.
Yeah, like I kind of like the Bucs receivers in this game. I mean, Mike Evans having, just doing what Mike Evans does and having another great season. Godwin has, been getting enough volume to be pretty good as well. And look, another one of these sneaky tight ends, right? Cade Otton has also quietly been very good over the last few weeks. Nobody's talking about Cade Otton, but go ahead and look at his targets, his receptions, his production over the last few weeks. He has been absolutely excellent, very quietly, very under the radar. So, like, if you want a sneaky good play, a guy that in most leagues is actually still on the waiver wire, by the way. If you need a tight end this week or for the rest of the season, go get Cade Otton.
Well, people stream him. That's what you do with your tight ends. But, yeah, I mean, 23 points this week. That's obviously outside the norm. But 9 points, 9 points. 2 weeks prior to that, 10 points. I mean, he's hit double-digit double digits or
which
near
is
double
what you
digits.
want out of a tight end, right? There's not a
Yeah,
whole
just
lot of tight ends scoring double-digit points anymore, you
yeah,
know?
give me 10 and I'm happy. And you know,
Oh, yeah.
he's one of those guys that can do it for you for sure, or at least has been so far. Where we got? I lost my spot. San Francisco at Jacksonville. This one is the one we've been waiting for. San Francisco coming off the bye at Jacksonville. It's Lawrence. It's Purdy. It's two teams grinding it out. I like this one for fantasy. I know you tell me the San Francisco defense, but they've shown that they can be beat. This is my play it all game of the week. We talked about it didn't pay off last week when we talked about Miami and Kansas City, but for this one, I like it. Play them all.
I agree. Play them all. I want to see Trevor Lawrence so bad in this game, especially coming off of a bye week, right? He
I
gets
like
a
Kirk
bye
in
week
this
to
one.
prepare for this big spot. The Jags are rolling right now. The,
Yeah.
the Jags have, I think it's a 4 game or a 5 game, it might be a 5 game winning streak going right now. They haven't looked super impressive, like offensively winning those games, but they are winning those games, right? And I really want to see this spot. This Trevor Lawrence facing the 49ers, I'm expecting big things. I kind of feel like he's going to have a big day with his bye week to reset, and something with Trevor that I've talked about frequently, besides being, the president of the Trevor Lawrence fan club, which I have been since the offseason, right, is that when you look at last year, he was very bad in the first half of last year. The second half of last season, a strong case can be made that he was the best, the number one quarterback in the entire league for the second half of last season. So he gets his bye week right at the halfway point this year, right? So if you want to kind of look at parallels, he gets this week now to reset, get back out there for the second half, maybe have another big second half again. He can really solidify that by having a big game against the Niners.
Absolutely. Here's your trap stat of the week. San Francisco on a 3-game losing skid. The Jags on that 5-game win streak, like you talked about. Jags at home. Paper will tell you that the Jags should win this game. That's your trap stat of the week. I just made up that entire trap stat thing on the fly, by the way, but I think I might keep it. Cleveland
Like
at Baltimore. AFC North battling it out. Cleveland's defense against this Baltimore offense that had two running backs inside the top 11 absolutely go ham this week. And Baltimore clearly in the lead to win this division. Cleveland might have something to say about it. I actually look to Baltimore to win this game. But that's your cautionary note with your Baltimore players. Is they're playing against that Cleveland defense that just blanked Arizona. I got it. It's Arizona, but Baltimore is not a big stat machine. And be careful of that rookie running back that everybody that's on your waiver wire right now. Don't expect him to do what he did last week.
Yeah, like it's fine to add Keaton Mitchell off the waiver wire. I'm definitely not starting him against the Browns, especially after having this one good game. This is the kind of game I have no interest for fantasy, right? I think these are two really good defenses, probably going to be a low scoring game. As you know very well, when two AFC North opponents face each other, we often get ugly defensive, low scoring kind of games. The way the
Yes.
Ravens defense has played this year, arguably the best defense in the NFL this season. The Browns have had a couple of hiccups, but as a whole, their defense has been absolutely elite as well. I expect this to be super low scoring, and I'm not trying to get any fantasy guys in this one.
Points differential for this one. Cleveland Browns are at plus 42. That's kind of at the bottom for the plus side. Baltimore destroying the competition at plus 115 on a 4-game win streak. It's I think the next highest one is San Francisco at plus 78, and they're on a 3-game losing streak. So I mean that don't put a ton of stock in that stat, but there it is. Atlanta at Arizona. This could be one where you want to play people just because both teams are so bad. I mean, you might just get something out of this one. I don't know. Bijan Robinson has disappeared from Atlanta. The entire Atlanta running game has basically disappeared. We got to change at quarterback. I don't know what the hell to tell you about Atlanta. Hopefully Drake London will be back, I guess. Kyle Pitts, everybody keeps wanting to do something as we've been wanting for his entire career. Arizona, Kyler Murray. We talked about stats being fantasy wise. Kyler Murray performs extremely well fantasy wise, and against Atlanta might be worth a shot if he gets in there. Like DFS, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts now for a long time has been someone we've talked about, like the advanced metrics, he's the anomaly of the advanced metrics because all of his advanced metrics say this guy should be elite top line tight end, and every year it feels like now people are like, but look at his routes run and his air yards and his yards per
And
route
his
and all
blah
this
blah
stuff and the
blah.
explosions coming. Well, guess what? He's getting outplayed by Jonnu Smith. He's not even the best tight end on his own team right now. And look, a lot of that too, Arthur Smith might be the most frustrating head coach from a fantasy perspective. Okay, like he's not giving the ball to Bijan. He's not giving the ball to Kyle Pitts. Some weeks he's throwing the ball to Matt Collins and Kadaro Hodge more so than Drake London.
Yep.
I mean, Arthur Smith is super frustrating when you have fantasy players.
Arizona, very good against tight ends. Kyle Pitts has only hit double digits twice. He's only hit the top 10 twice. Double digits 3 times after last week. Sorry, in PPR. But he's only broke the top 10 twice. He's only gotten double digit targets once in week 5. He's never had, again, week 5, he had 7 receptions. Other than that, he's never had more than 5. As you want this guy to be good. Everybody wants this guy to be good. Stat wise, and I'm sure talent wise he's good. He keeps getting the starting job, but stat wise, just not going to get it done for you fantasy. Detroit's back at Los Angeles. Love it. Play them all. Defenses are not fantastic on this one. Offenses are high scoring. They're big numbers. As long as they're not playing the Jets. Detroit at LA. This is your fantasy points bonanza game of the week. Yeah, I just made that up too, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, start everybody in this game. There's no one I'm necessarily fading in this matchup. Yeah, I mean, the Chargers defense, kind of like you said, they gave up 1,000,000 yards and 1,000,000 points to everybody not named the Jets. The Lions aren't named the Jets, and that offense has been pretty good. And by the way, they're probably getting David Montgomery back this week as well. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Play your guys in this game.
I'm looking for him on Amon-Ra St. Brown to have a good one. I'm looking for Keenan Allen to go nuts again. I'm looking for Austin Eckler to have a good game. I'm loving it all. Gibbs, I like everybody in this one. I really do. Let's see. Where did we go from there? We go Giants at Dallas. Everybody, if you got a Dallas player, and I'm talking even Brandon Cooks, play him. Brandon Cooks isn't going to get a ball because they're not going to have to throw it to him. I mean, they could literally just probably hit CeeDee Lamb with every single pass in this game, and they'd be just fine. Like, the Giants are that bad. The Giants are horrible. If you have Dallas's defense, congratulations on your win this week. You probably don't even need to roster anybody else. Just play your Dallas defense, take everyone else out, and you'll probably win. This is a huge tilt. I'm not even calling this a trap. This isn't like go put a hundy on New York just in case they pull it out. Like Dallas at home, the way they're playing, this game's over before it started. They say this is why you got to play the game. Play the game, or you don't have to play this one. We could really not play this one. Everybody be fine.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys opened as 17-point favorites in this game. 17-point favorites. With
I'll take
Tommy DeVito making a start against this defense, this pass rush in Dallas. Oh my goodness. Like, I fear for what's going to happen to Tommy DeVito in this game. It could be really ugly. And hey, look, I'll bring up another guy we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, Tony Pollard. Maybe this is the breakout game, right? A game that the Cowboys should be ahead the entire time. They should have plenty of opportunities to run the ball. Josh Jacobs had been struggling a lot of this year. He found some success against the Giants last week. The Giants defense, it's okay. It's not great. It's kind of middle of the pack, right? This is the kind of game that maybe Tony Pollard finally gets right in this one, finally has the big performance his fantasy managers were waiting for. Because if the game script goes like I think it's going to go, the Cowboys are going to have the ball a lot. They're going to be forcing turnovers. They're going to be playing ahead the entire game. So Mike McCarthy maybe can run the damn ball.
I'm going to say this hopefully for the last time. Pollard, single digits yet again this week. Still 0 touchdowns since week 1. He's got 1 on the entire season, and he's got 100-yard game.
If he's going to bounce back at all this year, this is the week to do it. Like if it's going to happen, it's kind of now or never, right? It's kind of now or never.
Go for it. I mean, grab him in DFS too, because you're probably right. It's probably going to be a good game for Pollard. Washington at Seattle. Washington should probably be favored after what we saw in Seattle. They're in Seattle. Sam Howell, QB6 on the year. Sam Howell, top 10 list for the last 5 games. Sam Howell destroying it right now. And what we saw from Seattle didn't look great. But Baltimore beat him on the ground, and Sam Howell's going to have to beat him through the air. So maybe that'll make a difference. I look for Seattle to bounce back in this one. This could actually be a decent game. These are not going to be your top fantasy scorers on your team, but I think if you have Washington and Seattle players, your Walkers and your Lockett's and Metcalfs and Johan Dotson, who's been on the top 10 list 2 weeks in a row now, I think you can play those guys in this one and be okay. I think you'll get points.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think this is the kind of game that fantasy scoring could be pretty good in. I agree also that I think that the Seahawks are going to bounce back here. I mean, they got destroyed last week, obviously. For me, the concerning thing with the Seahawks is something that we talked about before the season, and that's the Geno Smith regression.
Yeah.
Geno Smith has not been good this year. He has not at all been. I mean, granted, he's not turning the ball over a bunch, which, is still keeping the Seahawks.
Trust me, he's not doing great at all.
No, he's not doing really anything at all this year, minus that game against the Lions, right? That overtime thriller, that high-scoring game. He was great that week, but he hasn't really done anything since then, and I'm not surprised at all. I said it a lot before the year. Geno Smith has had one good season his entire career. Let's not just assume he's going to follow that up with another top 10 type of season like he had last year. But like we both agreed, the Seahawks team is so good around him. They're so good at all the other positions that they're going to be fine, even if he does regress, as long as he's not throwing a million interceptions.
He's got no excuse. He sits at QB 24. He's only got 9 touchdowns, but he also only has 7 interceptions. He's only been sacked 18 times, which is about middle of the road. He's got 1,800 yards. But he's only got a 65% completion percentage. And he's just not it's just not getting it done for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to diagnose the whole thing right now, but yeah, fantasy.
He's been a disaster in fantasy for sure.
Yeah, fantasy wise, not your guy. Then I don't know. We talked about what a sleeper the Thursday night game is. The Sunday night game is definitely going to rival it. It's the Jets at Vegas. I don't know. How does this make the Sunday night game? How have we not flexed it out of there at this point? The Jets go to Vegas, which means I don't play anybody in Vegas against this defense. I might stream the Las Vegas defense against Wilson, although I expect Garrett Wilson to have a nice day against this Las Vegas team. And, hey, I don't have to watch football this Sunday night because, wow.
Aren't we lucky that we get to see the Jets in prime time 2 weeks in a row?
Wow.
Lucky us, right? Thanks, and the Raiders, I think this is twice in the last 3 weeks that the Raiders have a primetime game? I mean, man, I get it. Like, things are different before the year starts with Aaron Rodgers. That's why we're seeing so much of the Jets and all. But, it couldn't get much worse this week for a Sunday night game, paired with the Thursday night game, paired with the Germany game. We hyped up last week as the mid-season finale because there were so many great matchups. This is the opposite.
Yeah.
They kind of said, all right, we did our mid-season finale last week, everyone enjoyed that one, so let's get all the bad ones in this week, right?
Man, Aaron Rodgers versus Jimmy Garoppolo. Oh, wait, that's not anymore, is it? Yeah.
Zach Wilson versus Aiden O'Connell. How about that?
Yeehaw, can't wait.
In prime time, Sunday night.
Let's go. Denver at Buffalo for the Monday night. This at the beginning of the season, this was going to be a great game. As the season progressed, we would have said Buffalo's going to blow Denver out. Now we get to this one, and we've got 2 highly underperforming teams that are just destroying their expectations. We talked about Josh Allen being the number 1 rusher for Buffalo last week. Buffalo's defense, not great. Denver, we know. We don't have to get into it. But fantasy-wise, because these teams are not great, I like Sutton in this one. Sutton's come through for you a few times. I love Josh Allen. Machine. Yeah, I love Josh Allen. I love Stephon Diggs. I don't know. You might, if you had a Monday Night Miracle at a Denver running back, you might, but you got to figure out which one to pick. I don't know. I think maybe the big 3, like I just said, I don't know where else you go with this one, but it's not going to be like a great game, but it's better than a Sunday night game, I guess.
Honestly, I love this game for fantasy. Like
Yeah.
I love both teams, like a lot of their players. I actually expect this to be a higher scoring game. Like I just think it's gonna be that way. You mentioned Sutton. I love Sutton. He seems like he scores a touchdown just about every game now for the Broncos, even though they're not winning games. I'm liking Javonte Williams. That's the running back I'm picking for the Broncos in this
Mm-hmm.
matchup. I like this from a fantasy perspective. Now, from a real NFL perspective, the Bills have to win this one.
Oh
The
yeah,
Bills have to win this game. If
it's
they
getting
lose
done.
this one, it may be time to start being really concerned about the Bills this season. Because if you go and look at the Bills' schedule right now, they have like a murderer's row of tough games coming up on their schedule. They got to play the Chiefs. They got to play the Cowboys. They got to play the Eagles. And it's like 5 games in a row of very, very difficult. So they have to win this one against the Broncos, or they could be in big trouble.
Luckily, they only sit a game back, and that's the thing because the Dolphins have come up short, and so Dolphins sit at 6-3. Buffalo sits at 5-4. Jets sit at 4-4, but no one's really worried about them. It's the Bills and the Dolphins. Then the Bills are only a game back, but you talk about that upcoming schedule, and that's really the story there when you talk about the urgency because they have no easy games coming up. I probably should have opened with this, but fantasy wise, some people are definitely looking to stream this week as Kansas City. You lose Mahomes, you're going to lose Tua and Mostert and Hill and Waddle.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing the number one, fantasy back overall with Hurts. In this one, AJ Brown, you're losing that Philly defense, and I mean, I guess you're losing the Rams. I don't know if you care at this point because without Stafford, but it gives Stafford another week to come up. But heavy hitters get knocked off your roster this week. I hope you plan for it. Luckily, those streamers are out there. We talk about Dobbs being, if you can grab him, Sam Howell's QB6 of the entire fantasy season. 4 out of 5 weeks in the top 10. Sam Howell's fantastic guy. If you can land him. I do like Dobbs again this week. There are replacements out there, but you're streaming for sure. The guys at the top of your fantasy standings are going to be hurting this week. This is the week to get a game back. We have been
And how about
talking.
Russell Wilson? How about Russell Wilson as a streamer? Like I'm fine with streaming Russell Wilson if you have one of those big name quarterbacks on a bye. I think this could be a decent week for him.
Russell Wilson has landed himself on the list a couple times this week.
And against the Bills defense that hasn't looked great lately in a Monday night kind of game. And it could be a competitive game, which could allow him to have a good one. Or, game script could also be like the Bills could blow out the Broncos. That is a realistic scenario as well. And if that's the case, garbage time, playing from behind, a lot of passing yards, kind of like, Zach Wilson had more passing yards than Justin Herbert because game script put it that way. I like Russell Wilson. I see a lot of scenarios where he has a good fantasy game.
And if you're missing those top quarterbacks, you got to stream somebody. Why not Russell Wilson? I mean, why not?
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking with Adam Hulse. There's his stats, Sports Talk with Adam Hulse. He is on Sportskeeda, NFL writer over there, right down there at Sportskeeda. Go / Adam Hulse. You'll find all his stuff, man. He pumps out articles all week long, and they're good stuff. I mean, seriously, can help you win your league stuff. Go check Adam Hulse out. If you want to ask him anything, hit him up on the X at Adam Hulse Sports. We're making that transition. We're not going to call it Twitter anymore. We're going to call it the X. People are starting to do it. That's what we're going to do. Adam, thanks for coming down. We had another great show filled with amazing stats. Look for the shorts, look for the videos, look for the quick takes on everything we talked about. And like I said, come back and see us every Tuesday. We will be here Tuesday mornings, 9:30 a.m. We will be live. You can call into the show. We're going to give you tons of stats. We're going to give you tons of picks. Talk about your fantasy week last week. We'll get you started into the next week. There is some fantasy points to be had out there. We talked about where to get them. Hopefully you stuck around for it or search through the recording. Adam, thanks once again for joining us. I hope you have a great fantasy week this week. And that is going to
I mean, it's fun every week. And again, we are now at the halfway point of the season. It's been an exciting first half. I expect even bigger things in the second half.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we went through every single team.
Yep.
We went through the entire schedule at the beginning of the season. Go over to that EFIN Sports Show channel. Check that out. We predicted how every game was going to go for every team. And right now I'm 86-50. Good old Adam here is 91-45. We are double digits, or in my case this week, one short every single week. I mean, we already told you how the season's going to play out. Go check it out because we're doing a pretty damn good job. Until next week, guys, have a great fantasy week. Take care. We'll see you guys next time.